In the desert outside Phoenix, Arizona, two very different stories are unfolding side by side, and the contrast between them says almost everything about the future of the American West. In one place, an enormous new factory is rising from the sand, a gleaming complex of steel and glass that will produce some of the most advanced technology on the planet. A facility so important that entire nations are watching its progress, and into that factory, day after day, flows an immense and reliable supply of water, the lifeblood of its operations, carefully secured and guaranteed for years to come. But just a short distance away, in a community of ordinary families, the taps tell a very different tale. There, residents have faced the frightening reality of water running short, of supplies being cut off, of hauling water from far away just to keep their homes livable, in a desert where every drop is precious and nothing can be taken for granted. This is the paradox at the heart of the modern desert Southwest, a place where water is scarce, where drought grips the land and the great rivers are shrinking, and yet where a gigantic new industry that consumes staggering amounts of water is being welcomed with open arms and assured of the supply it needs, even as some of the people living nearby struggle to secure water for their own homes. It is a story about priorities, about power, about who gets water and who does not when there is not enough to go around, and about the hard choices a growing region must make in an age of scarcity. And it raises a question that is uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. In a thirsty desert, when a great factory and an ordinary town both need water, who comes first and why? In this video, we are going to explore this collision between industry and community in the deserts of Arizona. We will look at the extraordinary chip making boom transforming the region, the astonishing amount of water these factories require, and why they are being courted so aggressively despite the desert's water woes. We will turn to the communities that have found themselves on the wrong side of the water divide, struggling for a resource that flows so freely to the factories nearby. And we will try to understand the deeper forces at work, the reasons behind this stark contrast, and what it tells us about the future of a region trying to grow and prosper in a place where water is running out. Stay with me, because this is a story about the choices that will define the American West for generations to come. Hashtag the chip boom in the desert to understand the story. You first have to understand the extraordinary transformation taking place in the Arizona desert, because it is one of the most significant industrial developments in the country. The region around Phoenix has become a major hub for the manufacturing of semiconductors, the tiny, incredibly sophisticated chips that power virtually every piece of modern technology, from smartphones and computers to cars and countless everyday devices. Enormous factories, known in the industry as fabrication plants or fabs, are being built here, representing investments of staggering size and drawing some of the most advanced manufacturing on Earth to the desert. The reasons this is happening are rooted in some of the biggest issues of our time. Semiconductors have become so essential to the modern economy and to national security that there has been an enormous push to build more of them domestically. To reduce dependence on factories located far away and to secure the supply of these critical components, this drive has led to massive investment in new chip factories, and Arizona, with its available land, its business-friendly environment, its existing pool of skilled workers, and its aggressive efforts to attract the industry, has emerged as one of the great winners in this competition. The factories rising in the desert are seen not just as local developments, but as pieces of a national strategy, projects of such importance that they carry weight far beyond the borders of the state. And the promise these factories bring is genuinely enormous. They represent tens of billions of dollars in investment. They create thousands of jobs, many of them highly skilled and well-paid, and they spur the growth of an entire ecosystem of related businesses and suppliers. For the region and for the country, they are a tremendous economic prize, a source of prosperity, prestige, and strategic strength. It is easy to understand why leaders at every level have worked so hard to bring these factories to the desert and to keep them there. But this incredible industrial boom comes with a catch, a fundamental challenge that sits at the very center of our story, because the making of these tiny chips requires one particular resource in truly vast quantities, and that resource is water. Hashtag the astonishing thirst of a chip factory. It might seem strange that a factory making something as small and as dry as a computer chip would need enormous amounts of water, but it does, and understanding why is key to the whole story. The manufacturing of semiconductors is an extraordinarily precise and demanding process, carried out in ultra-clean environments where even the tiniest particle of contamination can ruin a chip. And to achieve that purity, to rinse and clean the delicate components at the many stages of their creation, the factories use immense volumes of water, water that must itself be purified to an almost unimaginable degree. The water used in chip making is not ordinary tap water. It is processed into what the industry calls ultra-pure water, water so thoroughly stripped of minerals and impurities that it is far cleaner than anything that comes out of a normal faucet, cleaner even than drinking water, purified specifically so that it will not leave behind any trace that could interfere with the delicate manufacturing. Producing this ultra-pure water and using it to rinse the components over and over throughout the process consumes staggering quantities. A single large chip factory can use millions of gallons of water every single day, an amount comparable to the daily water use of a substantial town full of people, when you consider that multiple such factories are being built in the same desert region. The scale of the water demand becomes truly enormous. This is the heart of the paradox. Here, in one of the driest and most water-stressed regions of the country, in the middle of a long and punishing drought, an industry is being established that is among the most water-hungry there is. It is a striking irony, a monument to human ambition, and some would say, to human contradiction, that we would choose to build these thirsty factories in a place where water is so scarce. And it makes the water arrangements for these factories a matter of intense importance and, for some, intense controversy. Because, for the factories to operate, that immense flow of water must be guaranteed, and in a desert running short of water. Guaranteeing anything is a serious commitment with real consequences for everyone else who depends on the same limited supply. Hashtag the deal that secures the water. So how does a water-hungry factory secure the supply it needs in a thirsty desert? The answer lies in the aggressive efforts that have been made to attract and accommodate this industry. Efforts that include ensuring these factories have the water they require to operate and to expand. This is a crucial point because the water does not simply appear. It is the product of deliberate planning, of arrangements and commitments designed to give the factories confidence that they will have the supply they need, now and into the future. The region and the industry have taken the water challenge seriously, and there are genuine efforts to make the factories as water efficient as possible. The companies involved have invested heavily in technologies to recycle and reuse water within their operations, reclaiming much of what they use and running it through their processes multiple times, which reduces the total amount of fresh water they must draw from outside sources. There are commitments and goals around water conservation and reuse, and in some cases plans to eventually return or replenish water to help offset what is consumed. These efforts are real, and they matter, and they complicate any simple picture of the factories as mere water guzzlers, with no regard for the desert around them. But the fundamental reality remains that these factories require a large, secure, and reliable supply of water, and providing that supply is a central part of the deal that brought them to the desert. Their water needs have been planned for, prioritized, and assured in a way that reflects their enormous economic and strategic importance. When a project is worth tens of billions of dollars and thousands of jobs and is seen as vital to the nation, the water it needs becomes a priority, something that leaders will work hard to guarantee. And this is where the contrast with the communities nearby becomes so stark and so troubling, because while the great factories have their water secured through careful planning and powerful backing, some ordinary residents of the same desert have found their own water supply to be anything but assured. Hashtag the town on the other side of the divide, not far from where the great factories rise and the water flows so reliably, there are communities that have experienced the opposite reality, a reality of water insecurity that is frightening and disruptive. In the deserts around Phoenix, there are areas where residents do not have the kind of guaranteed, planned, and prioritized water supply that the factories enjoy. Some of these are communities that grew up in a more informal way, outside the boundaries of the cities with their established water systems, relying on arrangements that turned out to be far more fragile than anyone realized. For the people in some of these communities, the water crisis became painfully real when the supply they had depended on was suddenly threatened or cut off. Residents who had relied on water being brought in from outside sources found those sources drying up, whether because the city that had been supplying the water decided it could no longer spare it amid its own water pressures, or because the wells and other sources they depended on grew unreliable. Overnight, families who had simply expected water to be there, as it always had been, found themselves scrambling, forced to figure out how to get water hauled in from far away, at great expense and inconvenience, just to meet their basic daily needs. Imagine the anxiety and hardship of such a situation. To live in a home in the desert and not know whether you will have water for drinking, for bathing, for washing, for all the ordinary functions of daily life. To have to arrange for water to be trucked in, to ration what you have, to watch the cost climb and the uncertainty grow. This is the reality that some residents of the region have faced, even as they could look toward the horizon and see. Not far away, the great factories being assured of all the water they could need. The contrast could hardly be more stark, and for the people caught on the wrong side of it, it has felt like a profound injustice, a sign that in the competition for scarce water, they simply did not matter as much as the powerful industry next door. Hashtag why the factory and the town are treated so differently. To understand this troubling contrast, we have to look at the deeper reasons why a great factory and an ordinary community can end up in such different positions when it comes to water, because the explanation reveals a lot about how water works in the modern West. It is not as simple as saying that one is favored and the other is neglected, though it can certainly feel that way. The reality is a tangle of planning, law, economics, and infrastructure that adds up to a system in which some water users are far more secure than others. Part of the answer lies in planning and infrastructure. The great factories are built by companies with enormous resources, working closely with governments and water agencies to secure their supply as part of massive, carefully planned projects. Their water needs are anticipated, negotiated, and built into formal arrangements before the first shovel of earth is turned. Some communities, by contrast, especially those that grew up informally or outside established water systems, never had that kind of secure arrangement. They relied on more fragile, less formal sources without the guarantees and infrastructure that a major planned development commands. When water grows scarce, those without secure arrangements are the most exposed. Part of the answer lies in economic and strategic weight. A factory representing tens of billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, and national importance carries enormous influence. Leaders are highly motivated to ensure it has what it needs, because losing it would be a huge blow. An ordinary community of families, however deserving, simply does not command the same urgency in the halls of power. This is an uncomfortable truth, but it is a real factor in how water and other resources get allocated. And part of the answer lies in the broader rules and systems that govern water in the region, the complex web of rights, contracts, and regulations that determine who is entitled to what. Systems that often favor established, formal, well-resourced users over those on the margins. Taken together, these factors help explain how the desert can guarantee water to a thirsty factory while leaving some of its own residents to fend for themselves. It is not necessarily the result of anyone deciding that the factory matters more than the people, but the outcome of a system in which power, planning, and resources shape who gets the security of a reliable supply. Hashtag the bigger picture of a thirsty region. To be fair to everyone involved, and to understand the full picture, we have to step back and see this story within the larger reality of a region grappling with a genuine and worsening water crisis. The tension between the factory and the town is not really a simple tale of a greedy villain and an innocent victim. It is a symptom of a much deeper problem, the fundamental scarcity of water in a desert that is growing, developing, and drying all at the same time. The region depends on a combination of water sources, including water drawn from the great rivers of the West, which are themselves shrinking under the pressure of long-term drought, and water pumped from underground, which in many places is being used faster than it can be replenished. As the population grows and the climate grows drier, the total amount of water available is increasingly strained, and every new demand, whether from a factory, a farm, a new housing development, or an existing community, adds to the pressure on a supply that is already stretched thin. In this context, the arrival of a hugely water-intensive industry is bound to intensify the competition for water and to force hard questions about priorities. It is also worth acknowledging the genuine efforts and complexities on all sides. The factories, as noted, work to conserve and recycle water and to limit their impact, and they bring real benefits to the region. The authorities responsible for water face genuinely difficult trade-offs, trying to balance economic development, the needs of existing residents, the demands of agriculture, and the imperative of long-term sustainability, all within the constraints of a shrinking supply. And the communities struggling for water are, in many cases, caught in situations that are the product of long-standing arrangements and choices, not simply of recent neglect. The point is not that anyone is purely to blame, but that the region faces a fundamental dilemma. There is not enough water to satisfy every demand, and as the demands grow and the supply shrinks, someone, somewhere, will inevitably come up short. The story of the factory in the town is a vivid illustration of that dilemma, a preview of the kinds of conflicts that will only grow more common as the pressure on water increases. Hashtag Who Comes First when the water runs short at the core of this story is a question that the entire region, and indeed much of the world, will increasingly have to confront. When water is scarce and there is not enough for everyone, who comes first? It is a question with no easy answer, and the way it is answered reveals a society's values and priorities in the starkest possible terms. There is a powerful case to be made for the factories. They bring enormous economic benefits, jobs, prosperity, and strategic strength to the region and the nation. They represent the future of the economy and the security of critical technology, and they often use water more efficiently through recycling and reuse than many other users. From this perspective, securing water for such vital industries is a wise investment in the region's future, one that will pay dividends for everyone, including the communities nearby, through the prosperity it generates. But there is an equally powerful case on the other side. Water, many would argue, is a basic human necessity, and ensuring that ordinary people have reliable access to it for their homes and their daily lives should come before the needs of any industry, however important. There is something deeply troubling in this view about a system that guarantees vast quantities of water to a factory while leaving families uncertain whether they will have water to drink. It raises fundamental questions of fairness and justice, of whether the benefits of the industrial boom are being shared or whether some are bearing its costs while others reap its rewards. The residents who have struggled for water are not asking for special treatment, only for the basic security that the factories have been given. And their plight is a reminder that behind the grand economic strategies and the impressive investments are real people whose lives depend on the same scarce water. There is no simple resolution to this tension. Only the hard and ongoing work of trying to balance competing needs and values in a place where the water is running out. Hashtag the choice that will define the West, so the two stories continue to unfold side by side in the Arizona desert. The gleaming factory with its assured and abundant water, and the community that has known the fear of the taps running dry. Together they form a parable for our time, a vivid illustration of the choices and conflicts that scarcity forces upon a society. As the West grows drier and thirstier, as its rivers shrink and its aquifers decline, even as its population and its ambitions expand, these kinds of collisions between competing demands for water will become more frequent and more intense. The story of the factory in the town is not an anomaly, it is a preview. How the region resolves these tensions, how it decides who gets water and who does not, and whether it can find ways to grow and prosper without leaving some of its own people behind, will be one of the defining challenges of its future. It will require difficult choices, honest reckoning with the limits of a finite resource, and a willingness to weigh the competing claims of industry and community, of prosperity and fairness, of the powerful and the ordinary. There are no easy answers, and the pressures will only mount as the water grows scarcer, but the questions cannot be avoided, because water is not optional. It is the foundation of everything, and in a desert running short of it, Every decision about who gets it is, in the end, a decision about what kind of place the region wants to be. The factory will keep making its chips, and the water will keep flowing to it, and that may well be the right choice for the prosperity and security it brings. But the town next door, and the countless communities like it across the drying West, will keep reminding us that prosperity built on scarce water carries obligations as well as rewards, and that a society is judged not only by the wonders it builds, but by how it treats the ordinary people who live in their shadow. The story of the chip factory and the thirsty town stands as a warning and a challenge.